Okay.
Okay, Chair, we're now live.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to this virtual meeting of the Plans Committee for Charnwood Borough Council. There are a number of things I would like to remind people of before we start the items on the agenda. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council's website following this meeting. Under the openness of local government bodies regulations, people may film or record this meeting, and this is outside the control of the Council. However, people wishing to film or record the meeting should do so in a way that does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Also, so that the meeting is not disturbed, could I ask everyone present to please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent, and ensure that your environment is distraction-free. And can I also remind everybody that this is a public meeting, so please conduct yourselves in an appropriate manner. Thank you. As this is a virtual meeting, it will run slightly differently. Members will need to introduce themselves and state their name and confirm that they can hear and or see the proceedings. This is important for the purposes of recording attendance and the transparency of the meeting. I will do this by undertaking an alphabetical roll call. Members will use the raise hand feature in the participants section of the Zoom software if they wish to speak, and will be allowed to do so in a queue system. Voting will be undertaken by a roll call and of all present, and again in alphabetical order. Each member will state their name and how they wish to vote, for, against, or abstain. Speakers will be called forward at the appropriate time by the chair, and their microphone will be unmuted by the co-host. Speakers have 5 minutes each, and they will be timed by the co-host. When you have 1 minute of time remaining, a bell will sound, and the co-host will mute you at the end of your 5 minutes. If there are any technical problems with outside speakers presenting, then I will read out the speaker's statement, which has been sent in advance of the meeting. I'm now going to call out the names of each member in alphabetical order to confirm their attendance. Councillor Bentley.
Councillor Bentley here, Chair. Yeah, I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm that I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Camsell.
Hi, Chair. I'm here and I can see and hear the proceedings.
Councillor Capleton.
Yes, Chair, I'm here. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I am here and I can hear and see the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Forrest, you're muted. Right.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I confirm that I can both see and hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm that I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm I can see and hear the proceedings.
Councillor Ranson.
Good evening, Chair. I can hear and see the proceedings.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see the proceedings.
Councillor Tassell.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see the proceeding.
Thank you. And Councillor Ward.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Camsell to mute his microphone, please? Thank you. I'm now going to verbally confirm the officers in attendance. I'm not asking the officers to say their name, but we have got Richard Bennett, Head of Planning and Regeneration, Karen Brightman, Team Leader, Development Management, Lewis Marshall, Senior Planning Officer, Jeremy Eaton, Senior Planning Officer, Catherine Harrison, Legal Advisor to the committee, Matt Gudger, Information Development Officer and co-host for the meeting, Nadia Ansari, Democratic Services Officer and host for the meeting, and Sally Watson, Democratic Services Officer and clerk for the meeting. Could I ask the clerk to confirm the speakers who are in the virtual public gallery waiting to speak, please?
Yes, Chair. I can confirm in respect of item 1 P2006422, we have Agent Phil Rowland, Objector David Infield, and Councillor Parton, who's the ward councillor. In respect of item 2 P2008342, we have Agent Alex Prose, Councillor Forrest on behalf of Borough upon Soar Parish Council, and Councillor Ranson will also speak as the ward councillor. In respect of item 3 P2002902, we have Agent Stephen Bradwell and Councillor Parton, who is the ward councillor. And in respect of item 4 P2008282, we have Agent Mutha Al-Saloom.
Thank you. Could you also, we now move on to the agenda, item 1, apologies. Have we received any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Tillotson, and we have Councillor Bolton substituting for her tonight.
Thank you very much. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. The committee is asked to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of June. I will now call out each committee member in alphabetical order to respond. Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I concur that the minutes are correct.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Madam Chair, I was not at the previous meeting, so I can't confirm.
Thank you. Councillor Campsell.
Hi, Chair. Yes, I read the minutes for the last meeting and they look okay to me. Thank you.
Councillor Capleton, I know you weren't at the last meeting, so we will not count your, you can't really say whether they're accurate or not. And the same with Councillor Charles. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I confirm that they are a correct record of the previous meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I agree they're correct record of the previous meeting.
Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I confirm the true and correct record of the previous meeting.
Councillor Ranson.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that they are correct from the previous meeting.
Councillor Savage.
I can confirm that they are correct from the previous meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Tassell.
I can confirm that they are a true record of the last meeting.
Thank you. And Councillor Ward, you went at the last meeting, so I won't able to take yours either. Thank you very much. And I also confirm that they are a correct record. They will be signed and shortly, and they will be filed with the paperwork. Item 3, questions under committee procedure 12.8. No questions were submitted. Can you confirm that, Sally?
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Item 4 are disclosures of pecuniary and personal interest. Sally, are there any disclosures of interest?
Yes, Chair, by Councillor Forrest in relation to application P2008342. She will be speaking on the item on behalf of Borough upon Soar Parish Council and so will not be taking part in the item. Councillor Fryer in relation to application P2008342 declared a personal interest in the item as one of the ward councillors for the area, so will not be taking part in the item. Councillor Grimley in relation to application P20082882, declared a personal interest in as the applicant is a personal friend, so he will not be taking part in the item. And also by Councillor Ranson in relation to application P20083342. She will be speaking on the item as a ward councillor and so will not be taking part in the discussion, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Forrest, you have your hand up. Did you want to add to that, please?
Yes, just a small item, Madam Chairman. We have Mr. Phil Rowlands acting as agent for one of the applicants tonight. I just want to say that Mr. Rowland is known to me in a professional capacity, but not in a private or personal one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Capleton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The same for me. The applicant in item 4 is known to me in a professional capacity, but I have not discussed it with him at all, so I have no other interest.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. The speaker on the first item, his company is a company that my company works with. I've not discussed any of the items with him. I'm here with a clear and open mind.
Thank you. And Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. It's the same again. Item 4, P20082802. It's in my ward, and I do know the applicant, but I've not discussed it with him, and I'm here with an open mind.
Thank you very much. And we know others, so we will now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the planning applications. And we have 4 planning applications to consider tonight, and the details are set out in the agenda and in the extras report. So we move now to item 1, P200618/2, at the land at the rear of 43 Westfield Drive, Loughborough. Pages 9 to 32 in your agendas. Sally, can you confirm that of any councillors on this one, please? If they have an interest? No. Okay. Right. I will now ask the presenting officer, Karen Brightman, please, to present the application.
It's myself doing this one, Chair. Have the slides, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Lewis.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. So for item 1, we're in Loughborough, a land to the rear of 43 Westfield Drive, and the application proposes the erection of 9 dwellings with associated landscaping and access. Next slide, please. So the red line showed the site area, which encompasses 43 Westfield Drive, which would provide vehicular access to the site between numbers 43 and 49 Westfield Drive. The site is located within the settlement limits of Loughborough, in close proximity to the town centre. The site itself extends to just under half a hectare, is irregular in shape, and is situated between Westfield Drive to the north and Radmore Road to the south. Next slide, please. So the aerial photograph of the site provides better insight into the site's characteristics. So as you can see, the site is undeveloped, largely covered by grass, vegetation and trees, which some have been removed prior to the submission of any previous planning application. A number of large trees have been retained along the site's southern boundary, which is shared with Loughborough College. The site was historically used as private allotment land, but use of the land as allotments has not taken place for a number of years, and as a result, the site has become unkept and overgrown. There is a private right-of-way for allotment holders that runs through the site, and some of the adjacent land outside of the application site remains in use as allotment land, with other sections that appear to have been incorporated into the gardens of properties along Westfield Drive. In terms of what is surrounding the site, Westfield Drive is characterised by large detached dwellings of varying styles and ages set within spacious, well-landscaped plots. Brockington Place to the east is a recent development of 5 two-storey detached dwellings to the rear of number 23 Westfield Drive. This development was allowed on appeal in 2012. Bradmore Road to the southeast consists of bungalows of varying ages and styles, with some set out in tandem form. To the south are the larger college buildings and associated parking areas, which links with an Epinal Way to the west. Next slide, please. So moving on to the site photos, these 4 images show the site's context from Westfield Drive itself. So moving around in a clockwise direction, the first picture on the upper left of the screen is taken opposite the proposed site entrance, looking in a westerly direction. It shows the spacious character of Westfield Drive, defined by larger properties set within spacious plots and with well-established landscaping. The picture on the upper right is taken from the same position, but in an easterly direction, with number 43 Westfield Drive being the property on the right-hand side of the image. Moving down to the bottom right-hand picture, this image shows the space between number 43 and 49 Westfield Drive, where the proposed access would be. And the bottom left-hand picture is a closer-up image of the space between the 2 properties. Next slide, please. So moving on to the site itself, the first image on the upper left is taken from the rear of 43 Westfield Drive and looks along the pathway that runs through the site. So you'll notice on the pictures that the site is overgrown in its current state. The picture on the upper left-hand side is taken from the pathway looking south towards the site's southern boundary, which is defined by the existing mature trees, as you can see there. And then below that, on the right-hand side, this is taken from the same position, but looking southeast. And beyond the site boundaries, you can see the tops of the large college buildings and other nearby properties that are accessed from Radmore Road. And then finally, the bottom left-hand picture is taken from the same position, but looking back in a westerly direction towards the rear of the properties along Westfield Drive. Next slide, please. And then with this group of images, we move to the most easterly part of the site. So we're now away from Westfield Drive and nearer to Bradmore Road. The first image on the upper left-hand side is looking towards the western boundary. And you can see the roofs of one of the bungalows that is situated along Bradmore Road. The image on the upper right-hand side is taken from the gated entrance to Bradmore Road, looking north towards the newly constructed properties at Brockington Place. And with this photo, you can see the noticeable drop in land levels between the gardens of those properties and the northerly edge of the application site. To the right of that image, you can just about make out the line of the private right-of-way that leads off in a northeasterly direction. Moving to the bottom right-hand image, this is taken from the edge of Radmore Road, looking towards the gated entrance into the site, which is taken between the 2 bungalows that front Radmore Road. You can see on the picture, you can't see it on the picture, but there is a further bungalow built further up the driveway to the rear of the bungalow on the left-hand side of the image. And finally, the image on the bottom left-hand side is taken from the southern boundary within the site, but looking northeast across the site towards the properties within Brockington Place. Next slide, please. So in terms of what is being proposed as part of the application, the development would consist of 9 detached dwellings set around a central access road and turning areas. The proposed development is more comprehensive than we have seen proposed on this site previously, with development extending between Westfield Drive and Radmore Road. The housing mix consists of 7 bungalows and 2 chalet bungalows, consisting of a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties. In terms of parking, each 2 and 3 bedroom bungalow would have 2 parking spaces, and each of the 2 4-bedroom chalet bungalows would have 3 parking spaces, which is in accordance with the local highway authority's guidance. Each dwelling is considered to have an adequate sized garden, and the layout incorporates a wildlife corridor along the site's southern boundary. And there is also space for a planted water attenuation area within the area to the east of plot 6. The blue shaded line that you see across the plan is purely for illustrative purposes and shows the extent of the private right of way that runs through the site. which would be unaffected by the proposal, and users of it would continue to be able to use that as a private right of way. Next slide, please. So the site will be accessed between numbers 43 and 49 Westfield Drive with a minimum 5 metre wide shared driveway. The existing access number 43 would be removed and the redundant footway crossing will be reinstated and the existing hedgerow removed to make way for the slightly repositioned access. The access would be lined on both sides by a proposed acoustic fence, and the area to the front of number 43 would be reconfigured to provide parking for at least 2 cars with space for turning for that property. The access would also provide for the required minimum 43 metres visibility display in either direction along this 30 miles per hour section of road. Next slide, please. This slide shows the house types and street scene configurations. So the 5 bungalows across the top of the slide are plots 2 to 6, which consist of a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom bungalows and would be positioned on the southern side of the access road that runs through the development. The 2 units below are units 7 and 8, which are 2 1.5-storey 4-bedroom properties that are situated to the northeastern corner of the site, adjacent to the recently constructed properties within Brockington Place. So the external materials proposed for all dwellings would be a mix of brick and render. Next slide, please. So these 2 units are plots 1 and 9, which are both 3-bedroom bungalows situated at opposite ends of the application site. They are of the same layout and design, albeit handed versions of the same house type. Next slide, please. So the application plans are supplemented by a selection of 3D visuals which assist officers and members in understanding the layout and massing of the proposals. This image is a bird's eye view of the site looking from the north, with the access road from Westfield Drive on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, you can see the 2 larger 1.5-storey house types. Next slide, please. Again, a few more visuals from different angles. So the first image at the top is looking north across the rear elevations of plots 2 to 6, with the image below looking across the entire site in a northwesterly direction. Next slide, please. So key considerations for members. Officers consider that overall the application has been carefully assessed against the comments and consultation responses received and the policies of the development plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. Members will be aware that decisions on applications need to be made in accordance with the adopted development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In terms of the principle of development, the proposals are in a sustainable location within walking distance of Loughborough Town Centre and are supported by policy CS1 of the core strategy. Whilst the council can currently demonstrate 5.52 years housing land supply, the benefit of additional housing, particularly bungalows in this sustainable location, should be given significant positive weight. The proposal would result in the loss of allotment land, a reason for which the previous application was refused. However, the applicant has agreed to mitigate the loss of allotment land by the payment of an off-site contribution, which would go towards increasing capacity at another allotment site in the locality. In this regard, the application would accord with policy CS15 of the core strategy. Now, since the publishing of the report and the circulation of the update report, officers have received further information from the council's open spaces team in that a project has been identified for the spend of the off-site contribution. They've confirmed that the contribution would be used to bring allotment land back into use at a council-owned site off Shelthorpe Road in Loughborough, just over 1 mile from the application site. The application proposes a mix of 2, 3 and 4-bedroom homes, the majority of which are bungalows, which would meet the borough's housing needs. The housing mix is therefore in accordance with policy CS3 of the core strategy. It is considered that the design of the proposed dwellings are acceptable and the more comprehensive form of development now proposed relates to the built form and settlement character of this area of Loughborough and would preserve amenity for existing residents. The development would result in the loss of greenfield land, which contributes to the relative tranquility of the area, but this needs to be weighed up against all other planning considerations. The highway impact of this development, both on a standalone basis and cumulatively, is considered acceptable, and no objection is raised by the local highway authority. In these regards, it is considered that the application accords with policy CS2 of the core strategy. The ecological assessment has also been carefully considered along with the opportunity to mitigate impacts both on-site and off-site through securing a financial contribution. In this regard, the application accords with policy CS13 of the core strategy. Concerns with regards to flooding and drainage can be managed and controlled through appropriate conditions, and the application is therefore recommended for approval as set out on page 25 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now have 3 speakers for this application. So we have Mr. Phil Rowland. Is he present? Mr. Rowland?
Mr. Rowland should have been queued to speak. Has he been promoted?
Yes, Chair, I am present.
No.
Thank you.
He should be. He shouldn't be in the meeting. He should be as an attendee.
Are we okay? Can we go ahead?
Is he still in? Is he still in? That's it. Just yeah. Ask to unmute. Right, it's okay now.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland, if you'd like to commence.
Thank you. I'm Philip Rowland of Landmark Planning, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. So what are the material planning considerations? Principle of development, the National Planning Policy Framework provides a presumption in favour of sustainable development. This application site is located within the built-up limits of Loughborough and within a predominantly residential area, and thus is a sustainable location for development. I'm of the opinion that the principle of residential development is acceptable, as it accords with the requirements of policy CS1 and ST2 and the advice in the NPPF. The loss of allotment land. The loss of the allotment land, even though actually underused, is a material planning consideration. In order to mitigate the loss of this land for allotment purposes, the applicant has agreed in discussions with your officers to provide an off-site contribution towards enhancing and creating replacement provision elsewhere in the locality. And of the opinion the proposed off-site contribution satisfies the requirements of the policy CS15 of the core strategy, and the advice in the NPPF will be secured by a section 106 agreement. The housing mix, the proposed development is providing much needed bungalows consisting of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, and this is a positive element of the proposed development and should be given significant weight. In these circumstances, the proposed development is providing a good mix of properties that complies with policy CS3 of the core strategy. Design and impact on the area. The area consists of a mix of both traditional and modern dwellings within well-landscaped mature settings. The garden to number 43 Westwood Drive is retained, thus retaining the spacious character of the area. A number of large trees are retained that will assist with the simulation of the proposed development into its surroundings. I'm of the opinion that the design of the development in terms of scale, appearance and layout complies with policies CS2 and EV1, as well as the Council's adopted SPD on design and the advice in the National Design Guidance. Residential amenity in terms of scale and position of the proposed dwellings, in terms of visual impact and loss of privacy, are catered for through the single-storey nature of the development. In that respect, it fully complies with your adopted guidance. The proposed development will also provide a very good level of amenity for future occupiers. I'm of the opinion that the proposed scheme will not result in any adverse impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties and complies with policy CS2 and EV1. Ecology. Proposed development would technically result in a net loss in terms of biodiversity. The applicant has worked with your council, with the Council of Ecologists, in order to reach an agreed position. In this respect, and in accordance with the advice in the NPPF, the applicant proposes to pay an off-site contribution towards improving and enhancing biodiversity off-site elsewhere in Loughborough. This fully accords with your policy guidance and will be secured by a section 106 agreement. Highways and parking. The site's well located in terms of regular bus services and good cycling routes into the town, as well as being located within walking distance of the town centre. Paragraph 109 of the NPF advises that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. I'm of the opinion that the proposed development is highly unlikely to lead to any highway safety implications, and that the residual impacts on the road network would be minimal. So to conclude, the applicant has worked with your officers throughout the application process. The proposed development complies with all relevant policies in the development plan, as read the advice in the NPPF. As there are no material planning reasons to refuse the plan for this development, I urge you to follow your officer's recommendation and to grant the plan permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowland. We now move to Mr. David Infield. Just give a few minutes to get that set up. Is Mr. Infield available?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, when do you want me to start?
If you'd like to start now, Mr. Infield, you have 5 minutes, and after 4 minutes there will be a bell sounded, and after 5 minutes you will be muted, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. It is hard to understand why the planning officer, Mr. Marshall, has found in favour of this proposal when it is so clearly inconsistent with past Charnwood decisions, with Inspector Hendy's position with regard to Swithland Home's previous application for the site, with Charnwood's Environmental Protection Officer's concerns about noise nuisance, and importantly, the overwhelming concern of local residents, with 35 households writing to object to the proposal. Charnwood already has a compliant 5-year housing land supply. It is committed to, quotes, making the most effective use of brownfield land. Indeed, a large number of brownfield sites suited for development have already been identified in Loughborough. The proposed development would use mainly allotments. These are not brownfield sites, and Charnwood has no need to develop them. Moreover, the proposed houses are neither affordable nor designed to meet special needs for which there is a shortage in Charnwood. The shortage of bungalows, highlighted by Mr. Marshall, has limited importance given the recent demolition of bungalows in Loughborough to make way for 2-storey dwellings. Charnwood planning really should be consistent. The proposal will have a distinct negative impact on the character of Westfield Drive and add significantly to traffic on the road. Now, Mr. Marshall dismisses a key concern of Inspector Henley, saying, quotes, it does not propose any development within the rear garden of 43 Westfield Drive. This is actually factually incorrect. Plot 1 lies entirely within the garden of number 43, as anyone can come and check by inspecting the garden. This alone is sufficient reason to reject the proposal unless Charnwood seeks to overrule this key objection of the inspector. The development will destroy a major green corridor presently running between Radmore Road and Epinal Way, which is a haven to wildlife. The submitted biodiversity assessment indicated that half of the existing wildlife habitats would be destroyed, but actually no survey of existing wildlife itself was presented. It is known and documented by residents that badgers, protected in the UK, foxes, deer, pheasants, owls, woodpeckers, and many other species of birds make use of this green space. The wildlife corridor proposed by the developers is woefully inadequate and was found to be so in Charnwood's appraisal of the previous proposal. Mr. Marshall suggests that the loss of biodiversity be compensated by off-site mitigation. This approach is only permitted under government rules as, quotes, a last resort, and this proposal is not so attractive that such a last resort is required. Note also that Charnwood's sustainability appraisal report is already concerned by the, quotes, loss and fragmentation of habitats and potential harm to species due to development pressures. Please do not add to this problem by supporting this proposal. The proposed access road will run approximately 2 meters from our living room window. The noise impact on the garden will be made worse by 2 turning areas, one at the end of our garden, to be used by vehicles as well as delivery vans and waste collection lorries. Our presently quiet rear garden and house will become subject to significant disturbance from traffic noise, as highlighted by Charnwood's own Environmental Protection Officer. At the time of the appeal of their earlier proposal for 4 houses, the developers submitted a noise appraisal. This analysis was actually technically flawed in that it ignored this living room window. The noise from the present proposal will be even more significant, with an overdoubling of the number of houses. It is conspicuous that the developers have submitted no noise analysis this time, perhaps because the results would not help their case. Mr. Marshall's dismissal of the noise issue is vague to say the least, and similar noise concerns apply to number 43. Charnwood application P18-0589/2 for the construction of just 2 dwellings on land to the rear of 63 Iveshead Road was turned down in May 2018. The head of planning wrote at that time, the proposed dwellings would be accessed by a narrow driveway and parking and turning areas in close proximity to rooms, windows and private back gardens.
That's 1 minute left, Mr. Infield.
It concluded that this would lead to an unacceptable loss of amenity by reason of noise and disturbance and loss of privacy to the occupiers of these dwellings. Similar considerations surely apply in the present case. Other residents are rightly concerned by potential construction noise, but this has been dismissed by the planning officer as not of material concern. In summary then, this proposal that is opposed by so many residents of Westfield Drive, and far more than their previous proposals, and also from Brockington Place, it will destroy a valuable wildlife corridor, and the housing is not needed. In this time of coronavirus, the environmental and health benefits of green spaces have been highlighted. I believe I have provided strong material reasons why the Planning Committee should reject this proposal, and I encourage it to do so and to remain consistent with previous decisions made by the authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enfield. I now call on the one of the ward councillors, Councillor Parton.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And you're shouting.
Right. Paragraph 119 of the NPPF states, local authorities should be proactive in identifying and helping to promote brownfield sites. Now, point 134 in the NPPF describes a green belt, and they exist to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. If this is passed today, Charnwood Borough Council's Radmore Park will be the only buffer in a mass of urbanisation. Point 137 says, before concluding that exceptional circumstances exist to justify changes to greenbelt boundaries. Do you think this is because it seems like brownfield land in urban Loughborough is being used for student accommodation? And point 138 states, where it has been concluded that it is necessary to release greenbelt land for development, plans should firstly give consideration to brownfield land, and they should also set out ways in which the impact of removing land from the greenbelt can be offset through compensatory improvements to the environmental quality and accessibility of remaining greenbelt land. And as I say, there will not be any, save for a park. Point 143 states, inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the greenbelt and should not be approved except in its states very special circumstances. And I'm thinking of things like bypasses for that. Here is an example of something Charnwood and the appeal inspector refused. Erection of 2 1.5-storey buildings on the land rear of 63 Iveshead Road. 2 reasons for refusal. 2 reasons. Second reason, the proposal would introduce 2 isolated new dwellings set back behind existing properties, and it goes on to say harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and it would therefore be contrary to the provisions of the NPPF that we have been talking about. So clearly not a very special circumstance. If planning permission is granted this evening, then it will seem like to our general public that we are setting a precedent for the destruction of beautiful, diverse, rich greenbelt land. Therefore, tonight you have the opportunity to save biodiversity, trees, wildlife, and the reputation of the council. Now, am I exaggerating? Well, 35 objections received. 2 previous sets of plans refused by Charnwood Borough Council's planning department, including one by the planning inspector. We were told earlier, contributions to biodiversity elsewhere. What about the biodiversity here? And finally, I would like a deferment of this planning application while the issue that Mr. Infield talks about of number 43 and the plot contained in it is clarified via the land registry and deeds document.
Has Councillor Parton finished now? I presume so. Councillor, Lewis Marshall, would you like to come back on what the speakers have raised this evening?
If I may, please, Chair. So it was raised, or it was disputed, the content of the report in respect of the position of plot 1 and the garden number 43 Westfield Drive. To clarify this point in the report, the position of plot 1 is on land currently used as garden by number 43 Westfield Drive, but it is outside of the original curtilage and indeed the well-defined southern rear boundary of gardens along this side of Westfield Drive. So the point I'm making in the report is that the arrangement proposed as part of this application is more acceptable in comparison to the previously refused application, which would have seen a dwelling within the original rear garden of number 43 and north of that very defined line along that southern boundary. It was mentioned that there are other brownfield sites available for development and that the council has a 5-year housing land supply. Again, this is correct, but it's not within the planning authority's power to require that developers build on brownfield sites. Each application must be determined on its individual merit, and it is considered that the proposal before members accords with the development plan, in particular policy CS1, which supports development within the defined settlement limits of Loughborough. It was suggested that the wildlife corridor is inadequate and that the off-site compensation towards biodiversity should be only used as a last resort. And again, in response to that, I would say that officers accept in the report that there will be a net loss of biodiversity on the site, and officers have worked with the developer to ensure that as much of this loss can be mitigated on the site as possible. And this has led to improvements to the scheme, such as the area for the attenuation pond and the widening of the wildlife corridor to the rear of plots 2 and 3. However, having regard to viability and the size of the scheme, it is increasingly difficult to always mitigate the impacts on site in every single case, as is the case here. So officers consider that the off-site contribution would be appropriate and acceptable in this case and would ensure a site under the council's control would be enhanced for biodiversity and it would be safeguarded in perpetuity. It was also concerns also raised about the impact of noise and disturbance on passing vehicles to the side of numbers 43 and 49 Westfield Drive. Now, the council did refuse an application on this site on those grounds in 2018, and the inspector in the subsequent appeal case did not share the council's view that the noise and disturbance would be so harmful as to warrant a refusal of planning permission. So whilst obviously this application does propose an increased number of dwellings overall, on the basis of the previous inspector's comments and obviously the proposal before members, it's your officer's view that there are not robust grounds to refuse the planning application for this reason. It was also raised concerns around obviously noise during construction, and again this is covered in the report, but officers accept that noise during construction is a possibility, but this would not amount to a reason to refuse planning permission, and the impacts can be mitigated and controlled as much as possible by requiring the submission of submission and approval of a construction management plan as set out in condition 15 on page 29 of the report. And also Councillor Parton mentioned a number of times the section 13 of the NPPF, which is green belt lands. Now, to clarify members that the site isn't on greenbelt land. Indeed, there's no defined greenbelt land in Charnwood at all. The site is a greenfield site within the settlement limits of Loughborough, but simply being a greenfield site doesn't necessarily preclude it from being developed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now I have a couple of councillors, and I will take them in the order that they came up. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Grimley. The officer just answered one of my questions was about greenbelt, had been mentioned several times, because I wasn't aware that there was any greenbelt provision in Charnwood, and the officer has confirmed that. The actual layout and design, which is fairly okay, but I think it is important. I do support the bungalows going in there, which I think is sort of the right type of development if it is to be developed in there. There are a number of wildlife issues which I think have been generally addressed through hopefully through the section 106 and the conditions in the planning consent. So I'd like to recommend or support the officer's proposal to agree this site.
So Councillor Grimley, you're proposing we go with officer's recommendation.
Officer's recommendation, that's right, yeah.
Thank you very much. I now have Councillor Tassell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was looking at the photographs, the one thing I wrote down was width of access. Now, I know that in Shepshed and in other places over the years, we have turned down planning applications because of the width of the access. Can the officers, can we go back to the photograph of the site where I think there's two cars side by side on the rough land between the two houses? Can we go back to it, please?
We'll do our best, but it's sometimes quite difficult, but I think you were right. But there we are, if we go down.
That's the one. Go back. That's the one. Now, there's two cars.
Sorry, are you talking about the one on the bottom left?
Yes, I am. Now, there's two cars parked there. Now, that to me doesn't look wide enough. There's a fence all the way along on both sides. And to me, that access doesn't look wide enough to be able to take the amount of traffic that's going to be within that development. Are there any highway issues on this at all?
Right. Is that your only question, Councillor Tassell?
That's my question, but my objection is that that access is not wide enough. You would not get two vans passing on that. You can get two cars on one side, but you would not get two vans, transit vans passing, and that's my concern.
Okay. Mr. Marshall, did you want to come on back on that now before I move on to the other speakers, the other councillors?
If I may, please, Chair, just very quickly. The access width is 5 metres wide, which is sufficient to meet the Highway Authority standards. I think the photo that you're referring to is slightly misleading in that the cars that are parked there are parked at a slight angle, so it probably doesn't give you the full impression of how wide it is. But obviously, we've consulted with the Highway Authority. They have no objection to the proposals, and they have recommended conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Can I come back, Madam Chairman, please, just for a moment?
All right.
Would it be possible to put some kind of a condition on where if it's I don't know what you call it, one-way traffic, but if you see a car coming the other way, you have to give way, like I don't know what you call it.
Yes,
but
I appreciate
you know what I'm getting at. So that two vehicles weren't passing.
I
on the narrow part.
appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Tassel, but I think if we have the highways are not against it, and all of us that live in tiny roads know that if there's a car coming the other way, you have to give way and vice versa. So, but it will be noted. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. A question for Lewis Marshall, please. In your presentation, you mentioned that there would be money given over towards an allotment, and you mentioned that that would be off Shelthorpe Road. Is it possible to tell me more precisely where that would be?
Did you want to come back to that now, Lewis?
Yes, so there is a council-owned site adjacent to the cricket pitch on Shelthorpe Road, if you're familiar with it.
Okay.
So there's a site there which has, as I say, is council-owned, and the off-site contribution from this development would go towards bringing that site into use as an allotment site.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Councillor Capleton, John Capleton.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm a little concerned about the prospect of flooding. The report doesn't make a lot about it, but just the visual images of the land shows that a lot of this land is higher than the surrounding buildings. Now, in Loughborough and throughout Charnwood, we've had a terrible time this past year. And I just like a little bit more assurance that this is being taken into account, and also what is going to be done to improve, make drainage really good there, so that so you cannot flood, not necessarily the new buildings, but the surrounding buildings once this land is built on, and you no longer have the seepage into the ground. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Lewis Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the LFA has been consulted on this application, and they referred the authority to their standing advice, because it is a minor development. It is less than 10 units. There is space left over within the application site for an attenuation pond. So it is envisaged that obviously we would require details of that attenuation feature and a drainage strategy generally prior to the development commencing, and that is set out on condition 17 of the report on page 29.
Is that okay, Councillor Capleton? Councillor Capleton, has that answered your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Camsell.
Yes, Chair. I've listened to everybody's views, objectors and people that seem to be for this development, but it just seems to me a few years ago, well, something like this came up before, and we turned it down when we never had a adequate housing supply. So now why other councils sort of jumping to get this passed when we have a housing supply does seem a bit daft to me. I mean, this little area of land is the last green lung between the busy Epsom Way and the centre of Loughborough. It's a haven for wildlife. We don't need the houses. If it goes ahead, Westfield Drive is going to be a busy, full of lots more cars on the road there. I mean, it's a quiet residential road. It'll be changed forever for the worst. So I think I'm against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, possibly to Lewis. One was about the financial mitigation being offered for the loss of allotment space. I just wondered if that was offered the last time a planning application was made for the same area, and also if the area that you're planning on using that mitigation for is actually in need of extra allotment space, because it does say in the report that in this area there is already plenty of allotment space. And also to make a point about the mitigation, I know it's not greenbelt land, it's greenfield sites, but it's all very well mitigating, but once that biodiversity is lost in that area, you can't just transplant it to another area. It doesn't just move at our convenience. And as Councillor Campsell pointed out, that is one of the very few remaining green lungs we have in the area. And also there seems to be more development involved in this planning application than there was in the last one that was refused. So I'm also a bit perplexed about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the previous application which was refused, there was no mitigation for the loss of the allotment land provided as part of the application or indeed the subsequent appeal. So that was one of the reasons which the inspector in the case of the previous appeal did dismiss it, because there was no compensation. Obviously now the applicant has agreed to compensate for the loss of the allotment land, which would, as I said, it would be a council-owned site, and there is public interest in securing a publicly owned allotment site elsewhere, as opposed to this privately owned allotment site, which if it remains privately owned and undeveloped, there is no guarantee that it will be let out to people that want allotments. Now, in terms of allotment provision, there is, as I understand it, a surplus of allotments in this particular ward of Loughborough, but Loughborough as a whole, there is a shortage. And as I understand, the area in which the allotments would be, the site that's being suggested off Shelthorpe Road, there is a shortage. So it would mitigate a shortage elsewhere in Loughborough. But yes, in answering your question. And then in terms of the previous refusal, which was obviously a smaller development, and obviously this now proposes 9 instead of 4. The previous applications were confined to a smaller area of land, which was to the rear of Westfield Drive, which had been resisted due to its sort of piecemeal and fragmented approach to development potentially of the wider sites. So the current proposal is considered to be sort of sufficiently comprehensive, linking with both Bradmore Road and Brockington Place, better preserving the sort of unique character of Westfield Drive. So it doesn't extend sort of beyond that sort of key definitive line of the southern rear gardens of Westfield Drive. And yes, the site is undeveloped, and it does contribute at the moment to the sort of tranquility of the area. And as I said in the presentation, it's for members to make that judgment as to whether the benefits of the scheme outweigh the harms.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the proposal to go with officer's recommendation to permit.
Thank you. Right, I have no more speakers. I have a proposal to go with officer's recommendation by Councillor Brimley, and it's been seconded by Councillor Bentley. So we will now move to the vote. I'll call out each name in alphabetical order to ask how they would like to vote.
Thanks.
I would like to remind members that if any point they did not hear all the proceedings for this item, they should not participate in the vote. So I'm going to go ahead now. Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm against it.
Thank you. Councillor Capleton. Councillor Capleton.
Sorry, I was on mute, but thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm against the development.
Okay, Councillor Campsell.
Yeah, no question, against.
Thank you. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm against the proposal.
Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Ranson.
I'm for the proposal, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
Councillor Savage for the
Thank you.
proposal.
Councillor Tassell.
For the proposal.
Sorry, was that for?
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Ward.
Against.
Thank you. And my own vote is for, so that's 1, 2. If I could ask Catherine to confirm, I make that 8 for and 5 against.
Thank you, Chair. I will make that as well. Motion was carried with a vote of 8 for the proposal and 5 against, and that was with the officer's recommendation to approve.
Thank you. Right, and now moving to the item 2 on of the applications, and I will now, which is on page 33 to 48 on your agenda, and I will now hand over to Councillor Bentley to chair this meeting, as I have a personal interest in the application as one of the board councillors and will not be taking part. So I'll be muting and turning off my video. Over to you, Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fryer. Okay, so now go on to item 2, which is P/20/0834/2, land and building to the rear of 15 to 17 High Street, Barrow upon Soar, pages 33 to 48. Please can I ask any members of the committee who have an interest in this item, please turn off their microphone and video to deter them from participating in this item. If I can ask Nadia to confirm that any councillors who have declared an interest have turned off their mic and video.
Hi, Councillor Bentley. Yes, I just want to confirm that all those members who have an interest have turned off their microphone and video as requested.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the record, or just leaving there's only in this confirm which there's on half, there's more than one, I think.
So, Catherine, you're not coming through at all clearly. Can you repeat that, please?
Sorry, I was just telling the names of the council record in case they're only listening in.
I'm going to ask everybody else. Did anybody else understand what Catherine just said? Because I think, no, nobody did.
Yes.
Sorry,
so
Catherine.
Sorry, Councillor Bentley.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so Catherine was just saying, can we just confirm those members who will not be taking part in the discussion? So from my records, that should be Councillor Sandra Forrest, Councillor Hilary Fryer and Councillor Pauline Ranson.
Okay, that's super. All right, thank you very much. So as per public speaking at Plans Committee procedures, we'll now be following the following steps. We're going to have a presentation by Karen Brightman, who will present the application, and Democratic Services Officer will share the PowerPoint slides. Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Item 2 tonight is planning application P20/0834/2, and it's a planning application for a change of use from a storage building to a mixed use of A1, which is retail, and a cafe, which is use class A3, and it's located to the rear of numbers 15 to 17 High Street in Barrow. Next slide, please. This is the location of the site. So you'll see High Street on the right, and the hatched red area is the application site. Next slide, please. This is a zoomed in version of what you've just seen. So you'll see the area outlined in red, which is the area that's subject to the planning application. And there's also a small area outlined in blue to the south that's within the ownership of the applicant, but not part of this planning application. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the site. It's not especially clear, so I think we'll just move on to the next slide, the photographs. These are some pictures of the site. Running clockwise and starting in the top left-hand corner, that's the building that's subject to the change of use application. So just for context, it has lawful use as a B8 storage building, but it has been subject to planning permission for the exact same change of use as we're considering tonight, which was granted in 2016 and has just expired, hence the application to renew that change of use. Moving around, the second picture running clockwise is across the back of the unit. So you can see the patio doors from the first picture, and that's looking across into that little square of blue land that we saw on the second location plan. Moving down to the bottom right corner, that's a photograph taken inside the building, just to give you an idea of how it's been refurbished. It's had a new ceiling and various internal works to bring it up to standard. And then the final photograph in the bottom left-hand side is again a shot across the rear of the building, the patio doors there. The wall that you can see at the back of that picture is the wall to the co-op store. Next slide, please. Now, these photographs are all taken from the adjacent flat. If you're to stand on High Street and look towards the application site, there is a gift shop on the left-hand side, and this is the flat that's located above that. Now, that flat is accessed via an external staircase that's reached using the same access, which we'll see a photograph of in a minute, as the application site itself. So the occupants of that flat walk along the access way, and then they gain access to their flat using the external staircase. I've put these photographs in. I don't intend to go through each of them separately. I think they're fairly self-explanatory because they were submitted by an objector and they show that objector's concerns. So those concerns by and large relate to the windows that you can see on these pictures, and concerns that there's a loss of privacy as they're walking up the staircase into their flat. And you can see in the bottom right picture the fence on the boundary there. So you can see from ground floor level that as you're walking into the flat, you can see and you're aware of those windows. Next slide, please. This is the front of the site. So as you'll see on the left-hand side, that's the gift shop, the blue door, and the flat above it. And on the right-hand side is a florist shop. So you can see from that the access into the site, it's pedestrian only, obviously, is quite narrow. I think it's about 0.8 meters wide. And although it wasn't closed at the time of this photograph being taken, there is a gate, a wooden gate, that can be used to secure that access between those two buildings. You can see the posts of that there just on the side. Next slide, please. This is what's proposed. So you can see the elevations, which you could see off the photographs because the restoration work to the building has been carried out. There are no other changes proposed. So that's exactly what you would have seen if you'd been out on site. At the bottom of the slide is a floor plan. So you can see it's a single room with a toilet off it, fairly simple. But there is a small seated area at the back. And if you remember, the photographs showed a patio area just outside the French window doors. And that's where the applicant is proposing that there would be tables, some outside tables located. And they are just proposing, we're showing 4 of those. Next slide, please. Right, the main considerations for members tonight, I'll try and take you through these and just outline what the material considerations within each of these would be. So first of all, there's the principle of development. Now, the main policies to look at in the local plan and the neighbourhood plan there are policies CS9 and BUS7 of the neighbourhood plan. Both of those policies offer support for the development because they recognise that it's within a district centre, and within district centres, town centre uses such as this, which both plans identify as a town centre use, are generally supported. The only slight proviso is that the neighbourhood plan does make reference to seeking to have a predominance of A1, which is retail uses. This particular proposal is obviously for an A1 retail use in combination with an A3 use, so it's a bit of a hybrid between the two. But that policy does nevertheless also qualify that if there isn't a cluster or a predominance of that particular of non-A1 uses, then it doesn't really come to play. So in terms of the material considerations there, it is that it complies with the relevant development plan policies. But additional to that, there's support in national guidance for retail where it doesn't have an impact on vitality and viability of a centre. And at the moment, there is also, with the current pandemic situation, we are being encouraged to try to encourage local small businesses such as this and not make life too difficult in terms of them gaining planning permission, because we're trying to keep our town centres and our district centres alive and vibrant. On the second point on the slide here, amenity, that's again a material consideration. Policies EV1 and CS2 set out that we need to consider amenity and the types of amenity issues that we need to consider. In this case, because it's an existing building and it's not changing, there are no impacts in the traditional sense in terms of light or outlook, because that's the same. What members need to look at and consider tonight is privacy. Now, those windows that we saw on the slides are already there. So the question is, would this particular use of the building mean that there is a loss of privacy in terms of those windows? Now, officers have concluded that there might be some material impact on privacy, and they've suggested that that's mitigated by way of a condition that seeks obscure glazing on part of those windows. Again, another amenity consideration that's likely to come to play is noise. And if you look at the suggested conditions on your agenda, you'll notice that there is a suggested condition around hours of opening, which keeps the use in line with others in the high street and is what the applicant is seeking. And also there is a restriction proposed by way of a condition on the number of people that can be outside using the outside tables at any time. And officers' view is that that would satisfactorily mitigate any concerns in terms of amenity. Odour is also an amenity consideration here because there will be cooking. It's understood that it's not possible due to the physical configuration of the site, with this being a low building surrounded by higher buildings, to install a flue. And for that reason, it has been recommended by way of a condition that mitigates again, that no frying would take place within the property to avoid any impact any impact in terms of odour on neighbours. So those are all the things that you need to consider, and you also need to keep in mind as material considerations, that this site has had planning permission in the past and that has only very recently lapsed, that this is a fairly small scale development, so that in itself reduces those impacts, and also what the baseline that we're dealing with is, it's already in a village centre, so it's not a quiet, tranquil site. It is a site where you might expect activity, noise, movement, those type of things. Moving on to heritage, that again is a material consideration, and members do need to take that on board. It's within a conservation area. The building itself has some historic interest. It's an old workshop building, but officers' views are that there wouldn't be any harm to either of those heritage assets. The building's tucked away from the conservation area street scene. It doesn't impact on any of the traditional shop fronts, which are an important part of the significance of the conservation area. And it is a sensitive restoration of the building. It keeps the windows of the traditional proportion that was needed to ensure that there was light to carry on the work within. So the view is that there isn't any harm to heritage assets, and therefore no need to consider balancing public benefits against those. And also members need to take that on board in their planning balance, that it preserves the character of heritage assets in the area. Finally, on the slide, parking has been brought up as a concern. The relevant policies here are TR18, sorry, of the local plan, which is a saved policy, and also BUS 8 of the newer Barrow upon Soar neighbourhood plan. Now, both of those policies, depending on which one you apply, would suggest purely on use alone that there should be 4 to 12 spaces for a use of this size. However, or use of this type, sorry. However, both of those policies do also qualify that in a district centre or a village centre such as this, where trips are likely to be, there's likely to be significant trip generation to different uses, and combination of those trips, that those standards can be negotiated and should be flexible and should reflect the situation on the ground. Well, obviously there is parking within Barrow on Soar. I understand that there are, as with a lot of village centre car parks, there might be some difficulties with that, but it's nevertheless available. And it's also very unlikely that anybody would make a trip purely to go here and need to park, and that would be their only use. It's much more likely that people would use this use as part of a sort of complementary use of the district centre itself. So it's officers' view that those car parking standards could be reduced in this instance for this type of use, and indeed there's no local highway authority objection to the application either. Not on the slide, but I ought to just mention, because it's been raised in objection letters, disabled access into the site. Now the access in is very narrow. It's not wide enough for a wheelchair, and it couldn't be made wide enough for a wheelchair, and that's the important thing that members need to consider, because there is a duty under the Equality Act to consider that as a material consideration. But that said, it's a material consideration in its own right, so we have to have due regard to it, or you have to have due regard to it as decision makers, but it's not determinant. And in this instance, there's nothing that could be done that would mitigate against that. So it goes into the planning balance in exactly that way. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Now we've got 3 speakers on this item. Just bear with me a moment. We've got the agent for the applicant, Alex Prose. So is Alex Prose available? Yes, there he is. Okay, you've got 5 minutes. After 4 minutes, a bell will sound, and after 5 minutes, I'm afraid that you'll be cut off. Start when you're ready.
Good evening, Chair, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex Prowse. I'm a Chartered Town Planner from Astle Planning Consultants, and I'll be speaking in support of the application on behalf of my client and the applicant, Ms. Batley. This planning application is for the change of use of the land and the vacant detached single-storey building at the rear of numbers 15 and 17 High Street in Barrow-upon-Soar. It is proposed that the building will be used as a shop and cafe with an outdoor seating area. The application site is located in the village centre of Barrow. It is situated behind the main commercial frontage along High Street at the rear of numbers 15 and 17. The building is accessed from High Street via the shared pedestrian passageway in between the two properties. In November 2016, planning permission was granted for the change of use of the building to the exact same use that is proposed by this planning application. It has therefore already been confirmed that the principle of the proposed use is acceptable. Before my client purchased the property, it had been vacant for many years and had fallen into a state of disrepair and was overgrown. Upon purchasing the application site in February 2018, my client refurbished the property as they intended to convert it to a cafe and shop under the 2016 planning permission. These works included repairing the roof, rebuilding the external walls and replacing the windows and doors. It is understood that the property was originally built as a framework and knitter's workshop in the late 1800s. Therefore, when carrying out the refurbishment works, my client went to the significant expense and took the utmost care to ensure that the building was sensitively restored to a very high standard. This included liaising with officers in the council's conservation team to ensure that the new windows were in keeping with the historic fabric of the property. The refurbishment works were completed prior to the 2016 consent lapsing. As such, my client thought the consent had been implemented. Unfortunately, my client was later informed by the council that the 2016 consent had lapsed because the use had not commenced before the expiry date, hence the need to submit this planning application. As a result of these unfortunate circumstances, the property is ready to be brought back into use, subject to receiving your approval this evening. Given the building's historic use and the quality of the craftsmanship that has been used to return the building to its former glory, it is considered that the proposed scheme represents a significant opportunity to enhance the character and appearance of the Barrow-upon-Soar conservation area. Through enabling the vacant property to be put to an active and viable commercial use, the scheme will also help to support the vitality and viability of Barrow's High Street and village centre. What is more, the property will be occupied by a new, local, family-run business, and a number of local residents and businesses have submitted comments to support the application in recognition of the benefits that the proposal will bring to the High Street. These factors are deemed to weigh strongly in favour of granting planning permission for the proposed development. My client has worked proactively with the council to ensure that the scheme respects the privacy of the neighbouring residents. This has been achieved in a number of ways, including having similar opening hours to the other commercial premises along the High Street of 9 AM to 5 PM on Mondays to Saturdays and being closed on Sundays and bank holidays, restricting the number of customers who can consume food and drink outdoors to 8 at any one time, installing an obscured film to the top half of the middle row and the entire top row of glazed panes on the southern side of the building, retaining the existing 1.8 metre high fence along the southern boundary, and not permitting food requiring frying or deep fat frying to be consumed at the premises. Therefore, the proposed cafe and shop will be able to operate without detriment to the privacy and amenity of the neighbouring residents.
That's 1 minute left, Mr. Prose.
Furthermore, the proposed development will address the safety and security issues that were previously associated with the vacant and derelict property. It will also remove a potentially disruptive commercial storage use with unrestricted hours of operation from the site. To summarise, the 2016 planning permission confirmed the proposed use is acceptable. The scheme will enhance the character and appearance of the Barrow-upon-Soar conservation area. The scheme will support the vitality and viability of Barrow's High Street and will also support new local business. The premises will be able to operate without detriment to the privacy and amenity of the neighbouring residents. And planning officers have objectively assessed the planning application and concluded that it should be granted planning permission. It is therefore respectfully requested that members support the officer recommendation and approve the planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Prowse. The next speaker that we have is Councillor Forrest. and she'll be speaking on behalf of Barrow upon Soar Parish Council. Councillor Forrest, are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you well, thank you.
Right, I'll begin.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the members of Charnwood Planning Committee, thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. And firstly, I wish to make it clear that I speak to you this evening on this issue as Chair of Barrow upon Soar Parish Council and not as a borough councillor. Committee members, it's unfortunate that due to the current emergency, members of the Planning Committee have not been able to make a site visit. If you had been able to do so, the limitations of this application would immediately have become apparent to you. Access. Access to the proposed tea shop is on the high street behind what I can only describe as a back garden type wooden door. Indeed, I have a very similar door that leads around the pathway to my own back garden. Behind this on the high street is a very narrow pathway, less than a metre wide, leading to the proposed tea shop. There is not enough room on this pathway for two persons to pass. The pathway serves both the tea shop, the flower shop, the gift shop, and the flat above the gift shop. This flat is accessed, as you will have seen by the photographs, by an external stairway. And if granted permission, the tea shop will greatly increase the footfall down what has been hitherto a very private, secluded footpath. One of the issues that concern the parish council is that of security. We can only assume that during the hours of business, the door leading from the high street will be left open to indicate to customers the way down to the tea shop. Because if it is closed, you won't even know that it's there. If the door is left open, this will seriously compromise the security of the shops and the occupants of the above flat. On page 42 of your report, your officer states that the access rights of the passageway users are a private matter between all users. And Barrow Parish Council accepts this, but asks the members of the Planning Committee to consider the problems associated with the practical day-to-day usage of this passageway should planning permission be granted. This brings me on to the issue of privacy, particularly for the occupants of the flat above the gift shop. The applicant proposes to install an outdoor seating area for up to 12 persons. These 12 customers, and ones in the tea shop also, will be able to observe the comings and goings of the occupants of the flat, particularly as they go up the steep external stairs to their home. This use of outdoor space is incompatible with the privacy and security of the first floor flat and the neighbouring shops. Should planning permission be given, Barrow Parish Council asks that the outdoor seating area be limited to 8 people and that a limit is also be placed on the opening hours. This is to ensure that at least some degree of privacy and security is preserved for the neighbours.
That's 1 minute left, Councillor Forrest.
Thank you. Disabled access. There is no disabled access to this tea shop. The passageway is very narrow and the gate giving access is only 79 centimetres wide. This would not provide adequate access for wheelchair users and those attempting to negotiate access with a pushchair. There is only one toilet located at the side of the building to serve both staff and customers. Barrow Parish Council works very hard to ensure inclusivity in all areas of village life. We do not believe that this application meets those aims. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Forrest. For the last speaker now, we have Councillor Ransom, Ward Councillor, in conjunction with Councillor Fryer. I'm sure you know you have 5 minutes, and when 4 minutes have elapsed, you'll be indicated that 1 minute is remaining. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much for allowing Councillor Fryer and myself the opportunity to address the Plans Committee this evening on the application of P/20/0834/2. We are also speaking on behalf of concerned residents of Barrow Punsoar. You have had a very detailed report from the officers and heard from other speakers. The main problem we and others see are A, limited access to the site. The access is a joint one for adjoining shops and residents. If customers to the cafe had pushchairs or even a wheelchair, this could severely affect the access for other users to access their properties. B, lack of security for other properties. C, there is a lack of dedicated parking and the village is very strapped for parking. D, if the application should be approved by the committee, the following conditions should be: hours of business should be as previously approved, a similar restriction as per condition 3 of planning application P/16/2262/2. 3, a limit of 8 customers using the outside seating area, which may have to have further limitations due to the current circumstances. We appreciate that the access rights are a private matter between all users and therefore not necessarily a planning consideration, but it has been raised to us as a matter of concern by residents. Thank you for your patience and attention. Thank you. I'm finished.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, so there's been a lot of points raised there. I'm going to invite Karen Brightman to come back in and comment on what's been said.
Yes, I think a lot of these points I probably have already covered in the presentation, but I'll go through my notes. Councillor Forrest mentioned the increase in footfall and the worries about security, but I do just need to point out to members there that whilst there is a planning material consideration to think about security and crime and disorder under those acts, there's no evidence that there's a particular problem here that we're presented with, and it is the purpose of planning to control land in the public interest and not to seek to regulate private interests between individuals. So in that respect, the officer's report is correct in highlighting that the shared use of this access isn't a reason to refuse planning permission. It would only be a reason if it raised a planning concern such as amenity, which officers are satisfied that it doesn't do. And also, members do need to bear in mind that increasing footfall was talked about. This is a relatively small scale use. It's not a huge shop or cafe. In terms of privacy, there was mention of 12 people using the outdoor seating area, but I would just remind members that the applicant is agreeable to a condition that is restricted to 8 people, which is what the parish council have sought. Again, the width of the access was mentioned. I just would reiterate that there is a duty to consider access for disabled people under those acts, but if there isn't a mitigation that can take place, then there isn't anything that can be done to alter that decision, and it would be very difficult to refuse planning permission on that grounds, because it is an existing building with a use. So whatever use was going to be in it, you wouldn't be able to gain wheelchair access through that narrow passageway without altering those buildings that are within a conservation area. So the duty is to consider that. That's an entirely different thing from refusing it purely on those grounds, which I think would be very difficult to do, as there isn't an alternative, and any use in the building would create that same issue. And the same also goes with the parking situation. There is no parking or parking possible for that building, whatever use it's put in or put to. And a B8 use, which is the current use, would actually be something that would be less likely to be used alongside the existing village facilities, which means that in fact that would have a worse impact in terms of parking than what's being proposed. I hope I've addressed everything there.
Yes, thank you very much, Karen. Right, well, we've got two people indicating the wish to speak. We've got Daniel Grimley, followed by Councillor Joan Tassell.
Thank you, Chair. I think the important thing to remember here is that it is an existing building that does have a existing use that is, I believe, unrestricted from what I've heard so far. So it could be used 24/7 for a storage use, people coming and going, that sort of thing. I think the important thing here is to also bring a building into decent use, and to be able to control the hours of use, which we can do which is on the planning conditions, which appear to sort of pick up all the sort of major concerns here. So I'm going to propose a recommendation. Officers, I'm going to propose officers' recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. If I can now call on Councillor Joan Tassell.
Yes, I would like to second Councillor Grimley's proposal, because it's a high street, it's a busy high street, and to have a cafe to be able to just walk up to would be ideal, providing it is left at the same times, the opening times are left as the same times as the other shops. I can't see that it could do any damage to the area at all. There is, if I understand it, and it is still there, there is a lay-by opposite with this this property, and there is also the parking down at the railway station, which is quite close. So I don't think there's any problem with parking either. So I go with I support Councillor Grimley's.
Okay, well, I don't have any, thank you for that. We don't have anybody else indicating to speak. So it's been proposed by Councillor Daniel Grimley, seconded by Councillor Joan Tassell. I'm going to put that to the vote. So I'm just going to read out everybody's name in alphabetical order. Just bear with me, please, 1 second. Okay, so if I could ask you to state your name and indicate whether you're for or against the officer's recommendation as it's been proposed. So first of all, it's Councillor Bolton.
In favour, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Campsell.
Yeah, Councillor Campsell in favour.
Councillor Capleton.
Thank you, Councillor Capleton, in favour.
Councillor Charles.
Hello, Chair. Councillor Charles in favour.
Councillor Sandy Forrest is out of is effectively out of the meeting. Same as with Hilary Fryer. Councillor Daniel Grimley, I'm assuming you're going to be for it as you're the proposer.
Yeah, Councillor Grimley for the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Lowe.
For the application, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor John Savage.
Councillor John Savage for the application.
Councillor Joan Tassell. I'm assuming you're going to be for as you're the seconder.
That's right, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Emma Ward.
For the proposal.
Thank you. And myself, I'm for. So that's unanimous. Can you just confirm, please, Catherine Harrison, that that is correct?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's a unanimous vote in favour of the proposal, which was to go with officer's recommendation and grant permission.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm stepping down now as chair. I'm going to be calling back Hilary Fryer to the chair, but we've been going now just under 2 hours. I would suggest a 5-minute recess as a comfort break. If anybody thinks or doesn't think we should be having 5 minutes just now, please indicate. No, nobody's indicating that we shouldn't, so we'll have 5 minutes. It's 18:40 now. If everybody just leaves their computers on, because what we don't want is for people to lose you. And if we can be back at 18:45, please. Thank you.
If you'd like to join us, wouldn't you?
Oh, she's really cute.
She's very tiny.
Oh.
She's very tiny, but she'll sit like this with me, like a meerkat.
What is she? What is she? Is she?
She's a corgi crossed with a
I'm going to say she got corgi in her. She's
Hello,
gorgeous.
Chihuahua.
Just to remind members that this is still being live stream broadcast.
Yes, I know.
Sorry.
It was Matt. It was just a little light relief for any audience members out there.
We've got 13 viewers online at the moment.
Well, they'll have had a good view of Councillor Fryer's dog.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor Forrest, we can.
I have a note that says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Right, bear with me one moment.
I'm now being asked to start my video.
Oh yes, so if you start it, there we go, thank you.
There we are, thank you.
Are we all back now, or are we still waiting?
Don't know.
It looks as if we are all there, Chair.
Thank you. If someone isn't there, could you please indicate? We now move on to, thank you very much to Councillor Bentley for taking the chair for the last item. We now move on to application number 3, P20/0290/2, which is for 1 Albert Street, Loughborough. And I presume everybody that left is now readmitted, and we will have a presentation by, I think, who's taking this? It's a different...
It's myself, Chair.
Jeremy Eaton will be taking it, and then we have 2 speakers afterwards. So if I could ask Jeremy to do the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for a change of use together with associated demolition, extension and conversion works of the premises of number 1 Albert Street in Loughborough, in order to create a new residential development scheme comprising 9 apartments. Next slide, please. The application site is located to a southwestern corner at the highway junction of Albert Street and Royland Road, Bedford Street, within the development limits to the town of Loughborough. The residential property of number 3 Albert Street adjoins the southeastern corner boundary of the site, whilst an existing residential apartment building comprising of 10 apartments adjoins the southwestern boundary of the site. The site is located within a wider residential area with a town centre located to the north of the site. The application site is located within the Loughborough Victoria Street Conservation Area and lies to the south of the Loughborough Emmanuel Church Conservation Area. Next slide, please. This slide provides an aerial view of the application site and just puts its surrounding context in a bit more perspective. Next slide, please. The site is occupied by a Victorian factory building, which is understood to have previously been occupied for the purposes of an engineering use under U-Class B2. It's understood that the site has been vacant since May 2019. The host building covers much of the curtilage of the application site. However, there is an area of hard standing located to the northwest of the building, which is served by an existing vehicular access off of Royland Road. Pedestrian access to the site and the host building is also achieved off Albert Street. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the existing floor plans for a host building on site. The original Victorian factory is located adjacent to the northeastern boundary of the application site and is part 2 and part 3 stories in height. Subsequent rear extensions to the original building are single stories in height. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the existing elevations of a host building on site and reflect the context I've just talked about. We can move on to the next slide, please. This slide provides a variety of photographs of the existing site and the surrounding context. Starting left to right, the first photograph was taken close to a highway junction of Albert Street and Royland Road, Bedford Street, looking towards the site in a southerly direction and indicates the sort of original factory building on site. The second photograph was taken opposite the site on Bedford Street, looking towards the application site in a southeasterly direction and indicates the sort of side elevation of the host building and the rear single-storey extensions. The third photograph was taken from the same location, looking towards a southerly direction, and in the photograph you can see the adjacent apartment building I referred to earlier, which adjoins the southwestern boundary of the site. The fourth photograph was taken along Royland Road, looking towards the application site in an easterly direction and shows the rear elevations of the building. The final photograph is taken from the rear of the car park of the adjoining residential apartment scheme, looking towards the site in a northerly direction. And this shows the rear of the host building and the adjoining residential property of number 3 Albert Street. And just to point out, number 3 Albert Street has the sort of flat roofed first floor extension to the rear in the photograph there. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the site block plan for a proposed development. As you will see, much of the sort of rear single-storey extensions will be demolished, and that's indicated by the sort of black hatch line. In addition to a 2-storey rear extension, which is indicated in the red sort of coloured footprint. In addition to that, there would be a 3rd-storey rear extension proposed to a host building. The existing vehicular access to Royland Road will be stopped up, albeit a new pedestrian access is proposed off Royland Road. Also to note is the boundary wall fronting Albert Street and Royland Road that is also proposed to be reduced in height to approximately 1.5 metres. The external areas around the resultant building are proposed to be landscaped and would include an area of communal amenity space. Provision will also be made for a bin and cycle storage and a laundry facility to the rear of the building. Next slide, please. This slide indicates the floor plans and some of the, on the ground floor on the left-hand side indicates the sort of wider site plan, which was missing on the previous slide, but also provides the additional stories in height. And that clearly demonstrates that the building's going to be sort of a mix of 2 and 3 stories. Accommodation will include 9 studio apartments. Next slide, please. This slide provides the proposed elevations of the residential apartment scheme. In addition to the proposed extensions as previously outlined, the proposed conversion works to host building will include minor alterations to existing fenestration and door design to a front elevation, which is on the top left, the insertion of new windows and Juliet balconies to a side and rear elevations, replacement of existing doors and windows, and a re-rendering of the building facades. Next slide, please. The key issues in this case are listed on the side. The first one relates to a principal proposed development. In this case, whilst the proposed development will result in the loss of a building and site previously used for employment purposes and the use class B2, the development plan would not restrict the loss of its non-designated employment site. With regards to a proposed residential development, the site lies within the town of Loughborough, which is considered to be a sustainable location for housing growth. In addition, by virtue of proposed development, including the reuse of a currently vacant building, this will assist in terms of a regeneration of the town. Accordingly, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable in this case, in accordance with core strategy policies CS1 and CS7 and Save Local Plan Policy ST2. Moving on to the next issue, housing mix. The proposals would result in the creation of an apartment scheme comprising of 9 studio apartments, all of which comprise market housing. This would equate to 100% of the units comprising 1-bed units. Whilst this housing mix would not be in line with the recommended housing mix contained with the Leicestershire Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment, having regard to a core strategy policy CS3, the proposed housing mix is considered to be acceptable, as it would provide smaller units within the town which would also be compatible and in keeping with the surrounding residential development. Moving on to the next issue, the matters of design and heritage. By virtue of that hereby proposed, it's considered that the proposed development would be acceptable on design grounds. In this case, it's considered that the proposed demolition works, extensions and alterations to the host building on site would be in keeping with and enhance the character and appearance of the host building. In addition, in combination with the proposed landscaping scheme and revised boundary treatment to the northwestern boundary of the site, it is considered that the proposal would improve the character and appearance of the application site and would result in an enhanced street frontage along Royland Street on a prominent corner plot. Accordingly, it is considered that this form of proposed development would enhance the character and appearance of the street scenes along Albert Street, Browns Lane and Bedford Street and Royland Road, and in turn improve the character and appearance of the wider local area. In addition, by virtue of this assessment, it's considered that the proposed development would not result in harm to the significance of the Loughborough Victoria Street Conservation Area or its setting. Furthermore, by virtue of the siting of the proposal and its level of separation from the Loughborough Emmanuel Church Conservation Area, it's not considered there will be any harm to the significance of this designated heritage asset. Accordingly, it is considered that the proposed development would be in accordance with core strategy policies CS2 and CS14 and save local plan policy EV1, as well as the relevant provisions of the MPPF. Moving into the next issue, highway matters. As previously outlined, the proposal will include the closure of the existing vehicular access of Royland Road and the creation of a new pedestrian access in its stead. The local highway authority support this proposal as it would result in improvements in respect to matters of highway safety. The proposal does not include a provision of any off-street vehicle parking. The local highway authority have not objected to this lack of parking provision based on the sustainable location of the application site within the town of Loughborough, and have suggested that any demand for parking generated by proposal would be met within locally available public car parks, which have spare capacity. As a result, it would not be envisaged that this proposal would result in any demand for on-street parking, albeit in any event, the existing on-street parking areas available locally to the application site are subject to resident parking permit schemes and other parking restrictions. And the local highway authority have confirmed that the apartments proposed would not be allocated a parking permit to park on the street. Furthermore, the proposal includes cycle parking for 10 cycles within the proposed cycle store. Whilst this provision is greater than the standards outlined in the saved local plan policy TR18, it would be in line with the guidance contained within the Leicestershire Highways Design Guide. And this over provision would encourage future occupiers to cycle and would also assist in terms of offering future residents a viable alternative means of travel, as opposed to being reliant on a private car. On balance, it is considered that the proposed development would be acceptable on highway grounds in accordance with Save Local Plan Policy TR18 and relevant provisions of the MPPF. Turning to the other matters, these are covered within the Officers' Committee report. In summary, it's considered that the proposed development would be acceptable in respect to the matters of residential amenity, land contamination, ecology and flood risk and drainage. In summary, the recommendation before members this evening is one of approval of planning permission, subject to the planning conditions and informative notes outlined within the recommendation section of the Officers' Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers. The first one is Mr. Stephen Bradwell, who is the agent. Mr. Bradwell, are you with us?
Hello, good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
you'd like to start, you have 5 minutes. After 4 minutes, you will be informed you only have 1 minute left, and you're still talking at 5 minutes. I'm afraid we will cut you off.
Okay. Good evening. I'm here to speak in support of the application at number 1 Albert Street, which relates to the conversion of this former factory building, together with the addition of a 2-storey extension to provide 9 single occupancy studio apartments. This application has been worked up in consultation with your planning and conservation officers, as well as the County Highway Authority, taken on board their advice and comments, but in view of the concerns of Councillor Parton in respect of local on-street parking, it has been called into this committee. It should be noted that whilst there were 6 letters objecting to the proposals on grounds of parking, only 1 comes from a resident of Albert Street. The other objectors live a little way away from the building and it's difficult to see how they might be affected by these proposals. There were also 6 letters strongly supporting this development. The building, which you are all perhaps familiar with, is a prominent 3-storey former factory building on the corner of Albert Street and Royland Road, within a predominantly residential area on the edge of the town centre. The opportunity to remove a potential bad neighbour use from this residential area is, in our view, a major public benefit. These proposals will refurbish the existing building and replace the unsightly extensions at the rear with a new 2-storey extension designed to reflect the industrial nature of the site, as recommended by the Conservation Officer, in order to retain a link to its past use. This development also makes provision for the retention of a brick outbuilding, reported to be an air raid shelter, and this is to be used as the bicycle store. We'd also like to think that the refurbishment of this vacant building will contribute to the wider regeneration proposals for the town centre, in particular those proposed for Bedford Square. There is therefore considerable planning policy support for these proposals, as your plan officer's report makes clear, and the new development will preserve the character and appearance of the Victoria Street conservation area. Councillor Parton has, however, expressed concern about the impact of these proposals on local street parking, but he has failed to balance the nominal parking required for these proposals with the existing situation. There is no on-site parking provision associated with the existing factory, and when it was last used by an engineering firm, there were upwards of 10 to 15 people employed there. It also generated a considerable amount of service traffic for goods entering and leaving the factory, with a dangerous access to Royland Road, which this scheme will close off. Furthermore, the occupants of these studios have access to secure on-site bicycle storage, and given that the site is on the edge of the town centre, it is close to all of its amenities, as well as public transport services. Overall, this scheme will accord with the objectives of local and national planning policies, which encourage a modal shift from private car usage to more sustainable forms of travel. It is also the case that the streets around the site are subject to a residents-only parking scheme, and the County Highway Authority has made clear that the residents of these studio flats will not be eligible for parking permits, which will effectively negate any potential impact on the local parking situation. Furthermore, a parking survey undertaken by a local resident shows that there are very few occasions when parking on Albert Street and surrounding streets reaches 100% of capacity. The applicant also commissioned a parking survey from an independent highway consultant. This report found that at all times of the survey, there was sufficient on-street parking available on Albert Street and Victoria Street, with capacity never exceeding 75%. The findings of these surveys demonstrate that these proposals will not disrupt the existing parking provision for local residents, particularly when there are a number of car parks within a 5-minute walk of the building. It is our view that there will be no harm to the local parking situation, but this is not just me saying this. The County Highway Authority has not raised any objections.
Mr. Bradwell, I just want to let you know that's 1 minute left.
The authority's view is that the exclusion of vehicle parking should not exacerbate any parking issues within the vicinity of Albert Street, and there should not be any displacement of the existing parking. In fact, Rebecca Henson, the team manager at the County Highway Authority, has been very clear in her response. She has stated that taking into account the use of the site, its location near to the town centre, and that no residence parking permits will be issued, a refusal on highway grounds cannot be sustained in accordance with the MPPF. And your planning officer's report agrees with the views of the County Highway Authority. This is clearly a sustainable form of development, making the most beneficial use of this redundant building on the edge of the town centre, with no justifiable grounds to refuse the application on issues of car parking. I would therefore ask that you grant planning permission as recommended by your planning officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Parton as the ward councillor.
GTG engineering will be written into the town's history records as possibly the last engineering factory in Loughborough's centre. This building is in a poor state of repair and is going to require huge renovation. And there are 3 points. 1 is a problem, 1 is a request, and one's a question. The problem. The development will require tenants to not have a vehicle or motorbike. Do we really believe that none of the occupants in these flats will never have a vehicle, never wish to have a vehicle, never have a visitor with a vehicle? And I met county highways managers last year to discuss this continual creep towards permission of development that's no parking provision. The student housing market is saturated, therefore young professionals will wish to own or rent these flats, and they will require a vehicle. Leicestershire County Council have agreed that it is time to hold a review of their response to the parking issues around flats and HMOs. And on page 66, it states, given the availability of public car parks within the local area, it would be expected that the proposed development would not lead to on-street vehicular parking, nor would the proposal exacerbate any existing parking issues within the vicinity of the application site. I cannot see how that would ever work. How are we supposed to believe that? And yet 2 paragraphs earlier it states 14 vehicular spaces should be provided. Where are these? The entire area is under a County Highways residence parking scheme. There is nothing, however, to stop the tenants from leaving their vehicles on the surrounding streets from 5 o'clock in the evening, overnight until 0900, Monday to Saturday and all day Sunday. And to pay for parking during the weekends in the council car parks is approximately £7 and £5.70 daily and weekdays. And the car park opposite this development is private and will never be allowed to be used. At what point will applications be refused because vehicles will fill up already busy streets? And I do know this because I live in this area and I have seen through a resident who used to live on Albert Street how the factory used to have to cone parts of the street off in the evening prior to a delivery coming the next day so that the delivery could take place. So from personal experience and living in this area, I take huge issue with something said by, with respect, somebody that does not live in that immediate area. Now, here's the request. If permission is granted, will the developer, cognizant of the great historical importance of this building, agree to refurbish and reinstate the GTG engineering sign on the side of the building? Because generations to come will know what pride this factory building had in the unique history of Loughborough Town Centre. The artist impressions show no indication of the reintroduction of this classic 60s signage. And the question, to whom is this development aimed at? If no car is allowed, can we please guarantee a proportion handed over to affordable social housing? Or will the letting agent be a student landlord?
That's 4 minutes, Councillor Parton.
That's finished.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parton. Did the officer want to come back on any points, or shall we move over to the discussion?
Yes, please, Chair. Just a few points raised in respect to Councillor Parton. Obviously, in terms of parking provision or lack thereof on site, highways, the County Council Highways have confirmed in their consultation response that they have no concerns about the insufficient provision on site, and outline that the residents could, if they had a vehicle, park within publicly available car parks that are available within the town centre. And there's quite a number located within 200 metres of the application site. In terms of parking on street, well, as per my previous presentation, obviously the local streets in the immediate area are subject to a residence parking permit scheme, which is, my understanding, is controlled by the county council, which they've previously outlined that the future residents wouldn't have parking permits be afforded to them. So that in that case, they would be required to park in other car parks. So I can't see that in that event that this proposal would result in any impact on publicly available parking on street, subject to the parking permit scheme. In terms of the request made by the councillor in terms of a sign, that's not part of the application that is in front of us this evening, and ultimately it would be for the applicant to propose that if and when they were wish to do so. So I don't think we can particularly request that they do it in this occasion. And in terms of the final point raised in respect of affordable housing, this isn't a major development scheme, and therefore there wouldn't be any requirement to provide affordable housing in this case. But I think that covers off the main points raised by Councillor Parton, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have two speakers at the moment. Councillor Forrest. Councillor Forrest, you're still muted. There you are. No, you've muted yourself again.
Oh.
Now, just leave it alone. Yes, leave it alone.
Yes, I'm going to sit on my hands. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to support this application. I think it will be a really very nice redevelopment of what could be a very nice Victorian building, but in the last few years it's become an eyesore in that area, and I think that this is a really good use of that building to bring it back into use, to provide single accommodation, and I would be happy to propose we accept officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathise with the parking problems there, but the difficulty is that the policies at the moment are the policies in place. With the highways not objecting to it, I find that a difficult sort of reason to refuse this application. There are a lot of positive benefits of bringing the building back into use and that sort of thing. So I'd like to second the proposal.
Thank you very much.
Officer's recommendation. Sorry.
Thank you. I have no further speakers at the moment, so we will go to the vote. Again, it will be the same as you've done previously. This evening it will be by sorry, Councillor Kemsel.
Hey, sorry, I grabbed my hand up. Page 64 ecology report says that there used to be evidence of nesting birds in the old building until they had it re-roofed. So now we have a perfect chance to put something back, you know, when they have the extension. If we could have some nesting sites, as I mentioned last time, swift bricks put in, and also the planting scheme, if we could have native shrubs put in, birch trees would be fantastic for that place, you know, that part of Loughborough. Great for insects, and it would help the local wildlife from nearby Queen's Park, sort of thing. So could we have that?
We can certainly, that will be noted, and we can put it that it will be looked at. Thank you, Councillor Kemsel.
Tell me that would be so then, please.
Pardon?
Could an officer tell me that would be, you know, so that native planting would be put in and some swift bricks could be put in the new extension, please?
Councillor, sorry, Jeremy, can you come back, Jeremy Eaton?
Yes, Chair. Just in terms of the landscaping elements, that would be controlled under condition 7, as suggested in the recommendation section. If councillors specifically wanted an additional condition in respect of provision of some form of nesting opportunities, whether perhaps boxes or what have you, then I'm sure we can look at adding that as an additional condition.
Thank you very much. If you could, please. Okay, thank you. Karen Brightman, you wanted to come back? I've got Karen Brightman with a hand up and Catherine Harrison with a hand up.
Hi.
Karen Brightman.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to members that it might be difficult for us to start to require additional biodiversity measures on the site, because we do have a biodiversity survey that identifies that there isn't any current value that would be lost. I do understand that obviously in the past there has been something, but to put a planning condition on requiring something where we don't have any evidence that there's a loss of biodiversity might present a problem with the applicant.
Catherine Harrison, our legal officer. Catherine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. It was just to check or to remind councillors that we would need to, if we were to add another condition, speak to the proposer and the seconder. Because currently I think the proposition is as the
Right, Councillor Camsell, you wanted to come back quickly.
A bit cross. I mean, they're going to charge £1,000 a week for a flat, and I'm just asking for a £30 bird box. You know.
Well,
sorry.
I think what the officers are saying, we may not be able to make it a condition, and I think we can't presume it's going to be £1,000 a week for a flat. So I think all we can do, they will read this report and they will have probably been listening to this discussion. So I'm sure the views of the committee will go forward. No one else? Yes, now then we were asked how, if I could ask the proposer and the seconder if they wanted any changes to their proposal. Catherine Harrison, did you want to come back before I get moved to that? No, okay. So Councillor Forrest and Councillor Grimley, did you want any changes or were we relying on good nature?
Madam Chair, I'm very happy to support Councillor Campbell in his request for a planting scheme that includes native plants, and I'm happy to leave it to the officers to perhaps negotiate things like nesting boxes with the applicant. I'm sure, you know, a sensible conversation will resolve these issues.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grimley, are you in agreement?
I'm in agreement with Councillor Forrest. The other thing I would say is that could we add a advisory onto the planning consent about the nesting boxes?
I'm looking at the officers to know what we can and cannot do. Karen Brightman, did you want to come back?
Yeah, we could certainly attach an informative note recommending that those were provided, and when we're seeking the landscaping details, we could try and negotiate for those to happen. My concern is actually putting a condition on that the applicant could then appeal against if they're not happy with it. So I'm quite happy to leave it to be negotiated if we can do so.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Ward, and I think then we go to the vote because we had started. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's only a very quick one. I do think Councillor Parton had a point about the heritage aspect of the building. I think it's an excellent proposal and I will be supporting it. I sympathise about the parking, but that's an issue all over town, unfortunately, and something out of our control. But he's right about the heritage of that building, and I see in the planning application that they have been very sympathetic to the original use of the building in the plans and are planning to carry out building work that respects that. So as they will be listening, as you pointed out, I'd just like to sort of put a plea out to them and perhaps a friendly conversation with the ward councillors about putting some kind of plaque on the building as a memorial to its original use. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Ward. I think again it can be in the ongoing discussions, and I'm sure that will be considered. Karen Brightman, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, my only concern with that, Chair, is that that's not part of the proposal that we've been asked to consider. So members need to bear that in mind. And if we were to ask the applicant to install a sign that isn't part of their proposal, they may then go on to need to either modify their planning application or apply again under advertisement consent. So we do have to be mindful that we need to act reasonably. And also, there's nothing within the heritage statement, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, that identifies that sign as being something of particular significance, because if there had have been, we'd obviously have negotiated for that to have been retained or restored.
Right, we're opening up all sorts of things now. I remind councillors we had almost got to the vote. I don't want to get stuck on things. If we move now to Councillor Tassell, and this is the last person I'll go because we were about to vote.
It is only very quickly, Madam Chairman. Doesn't Loughborough have a badge scheme where we could they could put something through when the development is finished that would be appropriate? I'm sure there is one, because I've seen people.
Yeah, there is Councillor. There is the Charnwood plaque scheme, and there's also the county plaque scheme. So it's really up to interested bodies to put it forward, and it goes to a panel.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, Mr. Bennett would like a word, and followed by Catherine Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I believe Councillor Ward was not referring to the signage that Councillor Parton was in his speech, but was rather referring to the prospect of some form of heritage plaque on the building to recognise its previous use as a Victorian factory, just to recognise the heritage value there. And as was discussed, there may be opportunities to explore that with the developer and other areas of the Borough Council with a view to getting something in place. But it's not something we can secure by condition, as Ms. Brightman mentioned earlier on. But just to clarify the point, I think I can see Councillor Ward nodding in the background, which gives me some comfort I'm on the right track.
Right, Catherine Harrison, you wanted to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify the proposals and the seconds before we went to a vote, unless you were going to do that yourself, Chair, because I believe Councillor Grimley was requesting a second informative, a new informative to be added as a seconder, but we would need to check that with Councillor Forrest and just make it clear before members took a vote.
Yes, I think we did, but just to reiterate for complete transparency, Councillors Forrest and Grimley, you're happy to go forward as we have discussed?
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley?
Yeah, happy to go forward as discussed.
Thank you.
So sorry, Chair, just to be clear, just to make sure I'm clear, that is a proposal on the table which is seconded to go in favour of officer's recommendation with a additional informative to be added. And yeah,
that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move to the vote now. Thank you very much. So Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm for the application.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the application.
Councillor Camsell.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Capleton.
I'm in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the application.
Councillor Forrest, I presume as you proposed.
I'm for, Chair, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley.
Thank you, Chair, for the application.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the application.
Councillor Ransom.
I'm for the application, Chair.
Councillor Savage.
I'm for the application, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tassell.
I'm for the application.
Thank you, Councillor Ward.
For the application.
Thank you, and I'm for myself. I will go for confirmation from Catherine Harrison, but I believe that is unanimous.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. It's a unanimous vote in favour of the proposition.
Thank you. We now move on to, whoops, get my script right, the final application tonight, which is P 200828/2, 19 Churchill Road. And we have the presentation, please.
I think we've got some councillors we need to remove as well.
Oh, yes. Have we?
Councillors Capleton, Grimley and Lowe all disclosed an interest, so they'll need removing.
I think they said that they came with an open mind. If they could just, I wouldn't like to move them if they did come with an open mind. If they could put their hand up if they didn't come with an open mind, that might clarify the situation. Or I can ask.
Chair, I'll leave the meet at this point because the council is a personal friend of mine.
Okay, so if you would turn off your video and Councillor Capleton and Councillor Lowe, do you feel you need to leave the meeting?
Chair, I don't feel I need to leave the meeting. It's only because I know the applicant in a professional capacity.
Okay.
But I had no knowledge of it before I read these papers, and I've not discussed it with him, so I have no
Thank you.
ideas.
And Councillor Lowe, I think you're in a similar position.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I totally concur with what Councillor Capleton has just said. I'm aware of the application, but he may have an open mind.
Thank you. So I think that's all. So we've just got Councillor Grimley that has left. I think we can all say all councillors know the applicant but didn't know anything about this till we got the papers and therefore have come with an open mind. I hope they all agree with that because I certainly didn't, and therefore if you want to put us all down as knowing the applicant but coming with an open mind, I'll take advice from Catherine if that's how you would prefer it, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. It's a matter for each councillor to decide whether they have an open mind or not. I don't know the position, but if you're saying you all have the same position, same professional knowledge of the applicant, then it would be for each councillor to make their view. So if that doesn't help, but if we need to declare now and everyone has got that same relationship with the applicant, but are an open mind for certainty, we perhaps should state that now.
Well, I'll start off and say, yes, I do know the applicant, but I only knew it when I got these papers, what was happening, and I have come with a completely open mind. I've not discussed it, and I've never visited the property. Councillor Ransom.
Similar to myself, I know the applicant is a fellow councillor, but I didn't know anything about this application and I've come with an open mind.
Councillor Tassell.
I only know the applicant through the council and I did not know anything about this application, so therefore I come with a very open mind.
Thank you. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Similarly, I know the applicant, but I've come to the meeting with an open mind.
Thank you. Anyone else? Right, we'll move on. Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I too know the applicant, but come with an open mind. I wasn't aware that he'd got a planning application in before I saw the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go forward to the vote. Councillor Bentley.
For the application, Chair.
Councillor Bolton.
Hang on, sorry, Chair.
Hang on.
Haven't we heard it yet?
Yeah, Chair, sorry, we do need to hear the application.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought we were missing something.
I thought I'm moving ahead of myself. It's G&T time. Right, sorry about that. Can we have the officer putting forward, who's doing it? Karen?
Yes.
Then we have one speaker, poor Mr. Musa Al-Saloom. Probably thought we'd forgotten him, so we'll go through.
Right. This item, number 4, planning application P20828, is an application brought to you because, as you're all aware, it is a fellow councillor's application. It's for a single-storey rear extension at 19 Church Hill Road in Thurmaston. Next slide, please. This is where the site's located, on a residential road in Thurmaston, long, narrow plot. Next slide, please. These are the next two, this and the next slide are photographs of the site. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see the existing extension, rear extension, single-storey rear extension. In fact, at the back of the property, that would be removed and replaced by something similar, well, the same depth, but slightly wider. Next slide, please. So that shows from a distance, you can see the application property is the white bordered property on the left. On the right hand side is a matching single-storey extension on the adjacent property. And I'll just reiterate that the proposed extension isn't going to come out any further than next door's extension. Next slide, please. This is a photograph taken of the footpath that runs along the side, or from the footpath that runs along the side of the site. So you'll see there on the right hand side of the slide, that's the white bordered extension that we were just looking at, that's currently at the back of the property. And the purpose of showing you this is just to show you that atypically this is visible from a public area, whereas mostly single-storey rear extensions, you don't see them beyond the gardens of those properties. Next slide, please. This is a site plan, so you can see there, if you look at the pair of semis, you can see the white square that represents the single-storey extension next door, and then you can see on the left-hand side the proposal, which builds out slightly closer towards the footpath. So you can see the footpath there running just outside the red line between the house and 17A. Next slide, please. This is what's proposed. So it's a fairly standard affair. It's to produce an extended dining area and then a downstairs bedroom. And you can see there at the bottom again the footprint of the adjoining conservatory. Next slide, please. These are the proposed elevations. Monopitched roof, a fairly traditional design for an extension at the rear of a property, so nothing unusual there. If you look at the top elevation, that's what you would see from the footpath. So it's arguably an improvement on the existing structure. It's a more permanent brick-built type of extension. Next slide, please. The issues are those that members will be very familiar with for extensions: character and appearance. The extension is subservient to the appearance of the main dwelling. It is visible from the footpath, but it's not considered that it would be harmful to the character of the area. And in that respect, it complies with policy CS2 and EV1 of the development plan, and also with the specific SAVE policy relating to house extensions, which is H17. Amenity, as the development plan requires, that's been assessed in terms of light, outlook and privacy, and it's officers' consideration or officers' recommendation to you that there is no harm or offence to the amenity of any of the adjacent properties, and therefore this proposal would comply with the development plan. And finally, highways and parking. It does create an additional bedroom. but it doesn't give rise to a loss of parking that doesn't meet our standards. So there's no offence of policy TR18 or the Highway Authority's design guidance in that respect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll now call Mr. Musa Al-Saloom, who is the agent for this application.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, good evening, members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Mudar Al-Saloom. I'm the architect for the applicant, Mr. James Poland. This application is for a domestic extension, as being highlighted by Karen. It will enlarge the kitchen, move the dining room, and create a new ground floor bedroom with an ensuite bathroom in addition, and new downstairs indoor WC. This application, following the refusal of the previous application, which looked at providing a much deeper single-storey extension, which the case officer felt it was in conflict with immunity and impact on neighbouring properties. So this application itself took on board the original concerns of the historically refused application, and all of the concerns have been factored into the new design. The proposed extension will not now go beyond the length of the existing conservatory, as pointed out by Karen, which is in line with the conservatory of the property next door, being number 21 Churchill Road. This will ensure there is no loss of light to the garden of number 21 and no new visual impact created by the proposed extension at the rear. The case officer has outlined clearly in her report that the extension now is acceptable in its design and appearance and impact upon the street scene stated. The extension retains design features commonly utilised in residential properties, such as the simple monopitch roof. It is considered that the overall scale of the works will no longer be excessive and demonstrates subservience to the main dwelling that is appropriate for a single-storey extension. No neighbours have raised objections, and neither did the parish council. I would therefore ask that you approve the officer's recommendation and grant permission for this application this evening. Many thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Karen Brightman, did you want to come back on anything?
No, nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I have no speakers. Oh, I have Mr. Capleton. Mr. Capleton, John Capleton.
Thank you, Chair. I've read the papers and listened to the arguments. I think all the objections to the previous application, the one that was refused, they have all been well satisfied. The roof extension has been reduced from 12.9 metres to 9 metres. That's 3.9 metres shorter. And height's been reduced by about half a metre. So there's also there was a comment by the occupants of 17. They mentioned privacy, but this had been addressed by the opaque window on the side. And the people at number 21 haven't raised any objections, so I can't see why this shouldn't be granted.
Are you proposing that we accept
Yes,
officers?
I propose that we do accept this one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tassell, Councillor Joan Tassell.
I would like to second that proposal, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I have no more speakers, so now we can go to the vote. So we start again. Councillor Bentley.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Camsell.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Capleton, as the proposed representative, you're for. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. For the proposal.
Councillor Forrest.
Madam Chair, I'm for the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grimley. Oh, he's abstained. He's out of it because he knows. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm for the application.
Thank you. Councillor Ranson.
I'm for the application, Chair.
Councillor Savage.
For the application, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tassell, you've seconded, so I presume you are
That's
for.
right, I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
In favour.
Thank you, and myself. So with Councillor Grimley not taking part, I make that unanimous. Catherine, could you confirm the votes, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I confirm as well it was a unanimous vote in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Can we ask Councillor Grimley to come back and join us? Hopefully he's hearing us. And thank you very much, Mr. Grimley. We move on to item 6, the final item of the agenda, which is the consideration of the item 6, which is the list of applications that have been determined under delegated powers since we last met. Could you raise your hand if you have a question? I see Councillor Forrest would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I go to page 8? And at the top of that, there is an item relating to 91 Stora Road, which is in my ward, demolition of outbuilding, etc. And then when it comes to decision, no decision is given. Not particularly wanting to go into the details tonight, but I wonder if the officers could undertake to email me with the details of that decision or the current situation, please. Thank you.
Thank you. That was page 8 of the report, which is page 89 of our agenda item.
Yes.
One of the, can we leave that with the officers?
Yes, Chair. I'm just having a look actually, so I'll put my hand up.
Yes.
I'll put my hand up if I find out what the decision is.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, Richard Bennett, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the reason there's no decision there is because we don't make a decision on demolitions. It's just a notice to the council. Perhaps Karen can confirm if my thinking is correct on that, but we can certainly take a look at the applications and provide a response back to Councillor Forrest in due course.
Is that all right, Councillor Forrest? You've muted yourself. Yes. Is that all right?
That is absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Fine. Thank you. Is anybody else? Karen Brightman, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I've looked up the decision and it was a decision about demolition, but it was refused. So I don't know quite why it's not showing on there, but I can email those details to Councillor Forrest for her to have a look at if that would be helpful.
Okay. I see. Yes. No. Yes. I see no other hands up. So I would just like to say to everybody, thank you very much, particularly to all of the officers who've been very supportive tonight. And I know some of them have, this is the first time that they've had to get us in and out. And I'm particularly looking at Sally, Nadia, who haven't been in this position to the extent they have tonight. I would also like to thank all the committee for their attention and making this a really interesting meeting. And hopefully we will meet again on the 27th of August. And I would also like to thank our new members of the committee, Councillor Ward, Councillor Charles and Councillor Capleton, and hope that we haven't put you off and that you're not all going to go on holiday for the next couple of months. But no, thank you very much indeed. Have a good evening and hopefully speak again